the Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast with your host, Jackie Pilosoff.
No one should have to go through a divorce feeling alone and isolated. The Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast is a production of Divorced Girl Smiling, where every show is 30 minutes aimed to empower you, help you feel validated and understood, and connect you with some of the best divorce professionals in the industry. So grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and start smiling as you join us right now for the Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found and always at divorcedgirlsmiling.com. Before we get started, I want to tell you that when I went through a divorce in 2008, I went through it without any divorce coaching. I can personally tell you how important it is to get support during and after divorce simply because I didn't have any. Having the support of a divorce coach makes a huge impact both emotionally and in the outcome of your divorce. If you are going through a divorce, I want to tell you about a fantastic online divorce course, either for people who have a divorce coach and want some self-directed divorce support, coaching they can do on their own time, or those who choose not to hire a divorce coach. The course is called Better Than Before Divorce. It's an online course that offers 4 content-rich modules with topics like conflict and compromise, healthy boundaries, effective communication, and showing up as your best self. It was created by divorce coach and mediator Andra Davidson. Andra's been doing this for 25 years. And she is divorced personally, so she really understands and has a passion for helping people. If you want to find the course, you can find it at betterthanbeforedivorce.com or in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. I also want to tell you about a wonderful divorce mediator named Leah Hadley. Leah is a CDFA and a certified mediator. She is wonderful. Her niche is in complex financial situations, so she can really help you in this way. She's also a financial advisor. Leah just knows so much. She went through a divorce. She's a great person, really warm. You'll love her. If you want to learn more, you can find Leah at intentionaldivorcesolutions.com or in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. Substance abuse is a huge issue in divorce. I mean, all divorces are complicated and sad and scary, but when there's substance abuse involved, it can get a lot more complicated, a lot more emotional, and there's a lot more fear and anxiety involved. And today, that's what I want to talk about. I have an attorney on here who has some great advice for couples who are getting divorced when one of them has a substance abuse issue. The attorney who's my guest is Becker Good, and Catherine is the founder of her practice, the Law Office of Becker Good. Hi, Catherine.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How about you?
Good.
Thanks for being on the podcast.
Yes. Thanks for having me.
So you've been practicing for like over 30 years.
Mhm.
I mean, you have to have had dozens of cases where someone has a substance abuse issue, right? How
Yes.
is that different from a regular divorce without substance abuse?
Well, it depends on the type of type of substance abuse and whether or not it affects the children. I think you have to first look at, is it a safety issue, or sometimes it's more of a financial issue. So if it's a safety issue, there's certain precautions you want to put in place to protect the children and make sure they're safe. If you want to continue with parenting time with the parent who has the abuse issue. If it's more financial, there are other steps you can take to protect your assets and separate assets early on, um, to be proactive.
Okay, so do you mean when you say if it's a financial issue, maybe the couple doesn't have kids, so it's not really an issue other than finances? But I would say it's almost always an issue if someone has kids. I think the best way to talk about this is I'm thinking people who are listening to this are either considering getting divorced or they're going through one. and they're divorcing who they think is an alcoholic or a substance abuse, a person with a substance abuse issue, or they themselves are a substance abuse, have a substance issue, addiction. And so really we can put it into like a few different categories. And I bet you in all of your years of practicing, you have seen couples where the person admits, I have a problem, maybe has been in recovery, but now is out and is like back drinking. Then you have the person who doesn't admit there's a problem. And
Right.
then you have somebody who might have been sober for 10 years, but now the people are getting divorced and the person's worried that the person is going to spiral out of control.
Mhm.
So I'm sure that all of those things are handled, those different situations are handled differently. So the first one I'm going to ask you about is the couple where maybe let's just say, for example, the wife comes to you and says, I'm getting divorced. My husband's an alcoholic, but he doesn't admit he has a problem. But I'm worried about my children. What advice would you give that person?
So that is difficult because usually it requires court intervention if the person isn't acknowledging that they have an issue. So usually the advice I would give them is to go to court, file a motion for temporary orders, and try and establish some sort of guidelines or protection for the children. So, for example, if you have somebody who has a drinking problem, the court can order them to utilize SoberLink, which is a portable device where it's literally what it sounds like. You blow into it. It's like a portable breathalyzer. And there can be a court order that says prior to, during, after, this person has to blow into SoberLink, prior to having the kids during the parenting time or after, the parent who's at issue has to blow into the SoberLink. And if there is a positive result, if it shows that he or she's been drinking, then the visitation won't take place. If it's negative, then the visitation can proceed. Sometimes courts will only order that around the time that the parent has the children. Other times they'll say, nope, we want you to test so many times a day, every day of the week to establish that there isn't this ongoing problem.
Okay, I love SoberLink. I'm a
Mm.
huge fan. I just did a podcast with Chris
Really?
and
Mm,
so from SoberLink, and we
that's
were
great.
talking, and I was saying it's like the best invention ever created because it really keeps kids safe, it keeps parents accountable, and it
Right.
really gives you the answers that you're looking for. And, Chris and I, our podcast was about people who are falsely accused. So using SoberLink is good because if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, here I am in a divorce and my husband is saying that I'm an alcoholic, guess what? Get SoberLink. And then you
Right.
can say, hey, here, I'm breathing into this all day long. I don't have alcohol on my breath. And so, or, I didn't register that I'm intoxicated. So, you, have a leg to stand on.
Mm.
So it can be used in a really positive way.
Yes, I've used it that way as well, and in fact, I have one case where the parent has gone over a year, no positive results, and so after a while and you don't necessarily have to even go that long of a period of time, but after a certain period of time, the court will become more comfortable, hopefully the spouse will become more comfortable that drinking isn't an issue because obviously they're concerned that the parent's going to be either, supervising them while intoxicated or, also perhaps getting into a car and driving with them while intoxicated. So I think it also alleviates concerns on the other parent's part just to know the kids are safe. And the way just so if the viewers don't know, the way that SoberLink works is, you can set it up so that when, the parent blows into the SoberLink device, the other parent automatically gets the results, whether they're positive or negative, and
That is
so
so
it
nice.
it is, it's great.
Mhm. Okay, so you can have SoberLink ordered. Like, in other words, Catherine, you're a divorce attorney. You can go in and say to the court, we want this implemented before we will move forward with letting the wife or the husband have parenting time, right? You can
Right.
do that. Okay, let's talk about mediation. Can you get divorced from an alcoholic in mediation? And I'll break it down again. When somebody has admitted they have a problem, it might be easier. But what about those cases where they're still not admitting it? Is it possible to mediate?
You can try, you can certainly try, and like I was saying earlier, even something like SoberLink, maybe the person who is sort of defending themselves could agree to try it for a limited period of time. Or, maybe there's other safeguards. For example, the non-abuse drinking is an example, but the non-drinking parent might, you know, or just but from observing the drinking parent that they've been drinking, and so maybe you could write into the agreement if there's any concern that the other parent has been drinking, that, the parenting time won't take place. But usually, I think in general, if a parent is not admitting to any alcohol or drug addiction, and it's very hard then to mediate because that could be a sticking point that they just can't get past.
You're listening to the Divorced Girls Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. And today I'm here with divorce attorney Catherine Becker Good out of Massachusetts. Catherine and I are talking about getting divorced when one person has a substance abuse issue. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about tips for those getting divorced from someone who has an addiction issue. And what happens if a case goes to litigation? What is the protocol when it comes to someone having a substance abuse issue? We'll be right back. Trina Knudsen has a passion for helping kids and always has. She's worked for the Child in Need of Care Division for her district attorney's office, and she's also held jobs as a foster care social worker and a juvenile corrections officer. She's also a licensed social worker, a divorce attorney, a certified mediator, a parenting coordinator, and a certified divorce coach. So when I heard that she had this co-parenting program called BEH2O, I knew this was going to be something special. BEH2O is a co-parenting program aimed to empower, strengthen, and transform co-parenting relationships. It is so wonderful. I cannot even tell you how excited I am about this. If you want to learn more about BEH2O, you can go to thelaneproject.com. You can also find BEH2O in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. Now, I also want to tell you about a wonderful divorce coach named Lisa Lisser, who is a BEH2O certified coach. So Lisa uses this parenting program in her practice. I've known Lisa for a while now. She's a former attorney turned divorce coach, and she's a divorce mom. Lisa is amazing. So much energy, so dedicated to this, so inspiring, and great for people going through a divorce or trying to figure out their life after divorce. If you want to learn more about Lisa, you can find her at lzlcoaching.com. And you can find Lisa also in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. Welcome back to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. Are you getting divorced from someone who has a substance abuse issue, or do you have one and you're going through a divorce? If so, this is a great episode for you to listen to. My guest is divorce attorney Catherine Becker Good out of Massachusetts. Catherine has been practicing divorce law for over 30 years. She's had dozens of cases where one or both of the parents have substance abuse issues. And Catherine, I want to get into like certain tips that you might have for somebody who is thinking about divorce or going through one and is right at the beginning and knows their spouse is an alcoholic. What would you tell them in the consultation if they came to see you?
I think what I normally tell people is, try to write everything down. Keep a journal and, say even go to CVS and just get a cheap binder. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. But anytime you have any observations, or you suspect drinking, just write it down. Sometimes the parent will come across, empty bottles stashed somewhere. Take pictures. And I just think the more you can document it, the better it is because when you actually if you do have to go before the court, if the parent who has the addiction is in denial, it's going to be a question of credibility and who does the judge believe. And if you're the parent who's trying to establish that the other person has a problem, it's better if you go in with this evidence in hand, your notes, photographs, anything that you can bring in to substantiate what you're saying.
And I would put dates on everything
Yes.
so that
Yep.
it could go back a couple years and a judge or the other person's lawyer can see, like, all these different dates that it happened.
Mhm. Yes. Yep.
Okay, what else?
Just, I try and tell people just to be um careful, and if they think that the children aren't safe, they don't have to send the child with the other parent. If the other parent's trying to leave the home, there's nothing that requires them to hand over the child to that parent. So, I think, those 2 things together, obviously, they can approach the parent who has the addiction issue and try to discuss, maybe some compromise. Maybe, for example, if they go to their kid's baseball game and they typically, drink with their friends in the parking lot or the field or whatever, maybe the parent would agree to just limit it to 1 beer or something like that, something that would give the other parent comfort, to know that it's contained, so to speak.
Okay, I was also gonna say that even if the person doesn't adhere to the rules that you put in your, let's say you have a mediation agreement and you come up with this thing that says, okay, you're not allowed to drink while you're around the kids.
Mhm.
And, or you're not allowed to drink within 4 hours of getting the kids and picking the kids up. I think that even if the person does not adhere to those things, at least you have it in writing. And then you can keep a journal and say, well, so and so was drunk. I didn't let him have the kids, and at least you have something on record. But Catherine, tell me if you agree with me. I think the worst thing to do is to do nothing, to
Yep.
just not make an issue out of it because either you're afraid of your spouse, because
Mhm.
really you're just going to have bigger problems down the road. So you really have to make a big deal out of it if you truly think that your kids could be in any kind of danger.
Mhm.
And, I think it's really interesting that you said this. So people are probably listening thinking, well, I have a court order that I have 50-50 custody. And so let's say I don't give the kids to my ex, he can go back and say, she didn't give me the kids. But what I'm hearing from you, Catherine, is that a judge might say, well, that's commendable. You did the right thing. It's
Right.
not like a judge is going to say, well, you went against the court order, right?
Right.
Safety always
If
comes
safety is
first.
an issue, yes, safety always comes first with the kids.
Okay, I'm so glad. Okay, now what about people who head down that road of litigation? What is the process? Like, is there some kind of order you can file to say, okay, my ex is not getting my kids until he or she either agrees to do sober link or gets sober or goes to meet
Um,
it or what?
it's really more it's your generic motion for temporary orders, that's what they call it in Massachusetts, and you go into court and you ask the court to establish just, orders on a temporary basis, so they can always be changed. But one of those orders typically include a custody order, a parenting time order, a support order. So as part of the custody and or parenting time order, you can relay to the court your concerns about the safety of the kids because of the other spouse's, addiction. Oftentimes, the court will have that person test that day in the courthouse, either, particularly if it's drugs, they can, have them go and, provide a test. They can also have them provide a hair follicle test, which goes back further in time, and depending upon the results of that test, sometimes the court will implement immediately either a suspension of parenting time or supervised parenting time, and that can be either there are certain in here anyway, there's visitation centers where you can go and have time with your kids, but you're being supervised by a professional. Another option is to have a paid professional, who would accompany you during your time with the kids. And so that's if the court is really concerned about the safety of the kids due to substance abuse, oftentimes they will require that the parent have supervised parenting time only. And sometimes it can be a family member, it doesn't have to necessarily be paid. And then the hope is that over time, there's some sort of step up program if the parent who has the issue, over time shows that they're either, going into recovery or they've taken steps to address their issue or somehow there's an improvement. So that's usually what the court will do is have them test and then build in to the parenting plan some sort of structure that keeps the kids safe.
All right, what about the person who is listening to this who's thinking, I'm too afraid to bring this up as an issue. Maybe my spouse is going to hurt me or do something to me if I take the kids away from him. What's your advice?
I mean, I don't think you have a choice, and that is oftentimes a fear, but the problem is the alternative is to do nothing and then be afraid that the spouse is going to, for example, drive with the kids while intoxicated, or the kids are gonna get hurt, or, God forbid, killed, or, something is not it's not going to go well. So I mean, that's just a balance, and sometimes people do stay in the marriage longer just so that they can be there to protect the kids, and sometimes that's a decision that they make.
That's so sad because it's like we know the best choice is to leave, but it's very, very scary. So, do people ever get like an order of protection also?
Yes. Yep, and they do, and that's but it's so the substance abuse, isn't enough. It has to be that there's a real fear for the person's, physical safety, an immediate fear for their physical safety. So it may be that the substance abuse, causes a situation where they are in fear for their physical safety, but the substance abuse alone isn't enough. There has to be some sort of, fear of, like, imminent fear of, physical harm.
Okay, let's end on like a good note. Do you ever see people who get divorced and they're so glad that they made an issue of the drinking and possibly the person used SoberLink or they had consequences so they ended up getting help? Or you don't know because you don't follow the case like through, you're not around 2 years later.
I would say sort of both, situations have occurred because sometimes cases drag on, particularly cases where there are, child-related safety issues or parenting time is not agreed upon. Those cases can drag out for a year or 2 years, so sometimes you actually can see, progress during the course of that, litigation. On the other hand, sometimes, you wrap up the case and the plan is in place, and hopefully you never hear from them again because it's probably a good thing that things are going smoothly. But if they're not, you can always bring the case back. So anytime children are involved, you can always go back to court and ask to modify an order. So if, parenting time was going smoothly and there were no concerns, but all of a sudden the other parent starts drinking again or taking drugs again, you can always go back into court and revisit the issue of visitation.
I just love it. And I love all the advice. Thank you so much, Catherine, for being here.
Thanks.
And I want to end this by saying that I'm sure that people are listening going, I'm really scared to make this an issue. And I want to reiterate again how important it is, even if you're really scared now, it's better if you want a divorce, staying to protect your children is, I would never judge anyone for that because you have to do what you feel is right for you. But if you do leave and you really owe it to your kids and to yourself to make an issue out of it so that something will change and you're not putting your kids at risk for physical harm, but also for like all of the emotional things that they see with an alcoholic and, watching them drink all the time and then growing up thinking that kind of behavior's normal, and we all know drinkers can be moody and might be irresponsible and might not have a clean house because they're an addict. So there's all kinds of problems that go along with that. So just please, I'm urging you to make it an issue now, even if that might be the tougher thing to do than to pay later and have your kids pay and grow up in that kind of atmosphere.
Agree.
Okay, Catherine, thank you again. Really appreciate you being
Welcome.
on.
Thank you.
If you want to find Catherine and have a consult with her, she can be found at cbgoodlaw.com or in the trusted professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. Thank you so much for listening, everyone, and we'll talk to you real soon.